Few realize that one plant quietly sustained entire communities during World War II, not just in emergency rations, but as a central staple in daily survival. Its significance extended beyond calories. It shaped labor allocation, local economies, and even the morale of people under occupation. Yet after the war, this plant almost vanished from the modern diet. Understanding why requires more than agricultural history. It exposes the intersection of wartime necessity, government policy, and cultural memory. This plant became a lifeline in territories where conventional crops failed. It grew rapidly, resisted poor soil, and could feed multiple people with minimal inputs. Entire villages depended on it when bread, potatoes, and meat were scarce. Its use was so widespread that governments issued cultivation guides, rationing rules, and recipes specifically tailored to it. But despite its wartime utility, its prominence disappeared within a generation, leaving only faint traces in historical records and survival manuals. The plant's rise in Europe was neither accidental nor isolated to one region. German-occupied territories, parts of Poland, and Scandinavian countries all reported reliance on it, particularly in areas where traditional cereal production was disrupted by requisition, bombing, or drought. Agricultural ministries distributed seeds to households, and rural schools incorporated its cultivation into lessons. This wasn't merely a stopgap, it became a systemic solution to hunger, demonstrating how adaptation under duress can reshape societies, even temporarily. During wartime, conventional grains were often diverted to military use or shipped abroad, leaving civilians with critical deficits. In rural areas, reports highlight populations supplementing meager rations with this plant, which was versatile enough to appear in bread, porridges, and soups. Similarly, in Scandinavian regions, its cultivation in small household plots compensated for the collapse of potato yields after successive harsh winters. What is particularly notable is that the plant required little mechanization, meaning women, children, and the elderly could manage production when able-bodied men were conscripted or engaged in forced labor. The plant's biological characteristics made it uniquely suited to these conditions. Its roots penetrate deep, extracting nutrients from poor soils where wheat or barley would fail. Its above-ground growth provides both food and fodder for livestock, creating a self-reinforcing cycle of sustenance. Historical agricultural surveys describe yields that, per hectare, surpassed conventional staples in terms of calories available for human consumption under marginal conditions. This was not merely theory. Farmers and local councils meticulously recorded its contributions in wartime logs. Despite these advantages, it carried a stigma that outlasted the war. Prior to the conflict, it was often dismissed as a poor man's crop or relegated to animal feed. Governments and agricultural elites considered it unrefined and undesirable, reinforcing social hierarchies in food. This perception collided with necessity. During wartime, populations who had once ignored the plant were now forced to cultivate it to survive. Yet once traditional grain imports resumed and food policies normalized, the plant became culturally invisible again. The suppression wasn't only cultural. Post-war agricultural policy actively discouraged its cultivation. Governments promoted mechanized, high-yield cereals and the expansion of livestock farming, framing these as markers of progress. Wartime field studies and survival experiments were largely ignored or buried in bureaucratic archives. Scientific journals recorded its utility, but mainstream agronomy journals shifted focus to industrial-scale crops. By the 1950s, subsidies favored wheat and corn, effectively marginalizing the plant and erasing the wartime lessons that demonstrated its resilience and adaptability. The practical implications during the war were, honestly, quite profound. In rural villages, families coordinated planting schedules to stagger harvests, ensuring a continuous supply. Local barter systems emerged around the plant's flower and leaves, supplementing collapsed monetary systems. Children were enlisted to help gather seeds, turning agricultural survival into a communal endeavor. In occupied regions, clandestine cultivation was sometimes necessary, as occupying forces prioritized requisitioning other crops. Yet these small-scale operations fed thousands, illustrating how human ingenuity leverages even the simplest biological resources under duress. Medical and nutritional reports from the era really emphasize its effectiveness. While it lacked certain vitamins compared to potatoes or dairy, it provided a reliable caloric foundation. During winters, when starvation threatened entire regions, hospitals noted that patients with diets supplemented by this plant were more likely to recover. Such documentation underlines a lesson often overlooked in mainstream histories of the Second World War. Survival hinged not only on military logistics or food shipments, but on localized, adaptive agriculture. Interestingly, the plant also influenced occupation policies. Planners initially underestimated its significance, focusing on controlling wheat, potatoes, and livestock. Local populations' ability to survive on this substitute complicated resource extraction and occupation strategies. In regions with harsh winters or disrupted infrastructure, its cultivation allowed communities to resist rationing pressures, contributing to slower population decline and, maintaining social stability amid wartime displacement. Beyond survival, the plant shaped post-war memory and identity. Elderly villagers recount it in oral histories, often as a symbol of ingenuity and endurance. Recipes once considered crude became culinary staples in memory, even if official records minimized its importance. These accounts highlight a broader pattern. When necessity drives adaptation, societies can temporarily redefine what is considered acceptable or even desirable in food production. Yet, as post-war economies stabilized, the plant was quietly abandoned, a victim of modernization, industrial agriculture, and shifting cultural tastes. There are lessons for modern survivalists and planners. The plant demonstrates that resilience often resides in underappreciated, robust species that thrive under suboptimal conditions. Its history suggests that stockpiling seeds, understanding local growing conditions, and maintaining knowledge of forgotten crops could be crucial in crises. Modern agriculture often prioritizes efficiency over redundancy. History reminds us that overlooked plants may be the difference between widespread scarcity and sustainable subsistence. Additionally, the story underscores the consequences of policy and perception. Scientific evidence of a crop's utility does not guarantee its survival in practice. Social attitudes, economic incentives, and government priorities can erase even highly effective solutions from the collective memory. For anyone studying historical or contemporary food security, this is a critical reminder. The most important lessons are not always those that are formally published or institutionalized. Sometimes they reside in the margins, in oral testimony, and in small-scale practices that sustained lives when large systems failed. Finally, the plant's wartime prominence illustrates the intersection of survival and society. It wasn't just a tool to fill stomachs, it structured labor, influenced social cohesion, and became a quiet form of resistance against scarcity and occupation. Its decline post-war reminds us that history is not only about victories or treaties, but about the small, persistent adaptations that allow communities to endure. These stories are subtle yet profound, shaping our understanding of human resilience, resourcefulness, and, the fragility of cultural memory.